So these are some pretty dang big figs, and I don't have anything else like this in my orchard. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Friday, May 23rd here in South Georgia, and on today's video I'm going to show you a fig variety in my orchard that has me absolutely puzzled. So we're going to talk about that. I'm also going to show you a variety I just acquired that has some ties to George Washington, which is pretty cool, and then we'll give an update on the big greenhouse and what all we have left growing in there. So I've got this fig tree, this one right here, actually one of the largest trees in our orchard. Not as big as that white Marseille tree there, but bigger than most of the trees in our orchard. And this particular tree right here, I have threatened to cut it down the last 3 years, but as you can see, it's still standing. And I don't know how well you can see that there, but the label on this tree says Marroncino. Now, before we go any further talking about this particular variety, let me give you a little background that'll help make all this make sense. So over 90% of the varieties in my fig orchard, and I think we're up to around 70 or so different varieties now, over 90% of those varieties came from only 2 sources. And that's for a very good reason. So I mainly only use these 2 people because they are people that I trust. They are people that I know keep very good records and labels on their trees. They are people who know a lot about figs, and they are people who would let me know if they had an issue so I could correct it on my end. However, before this whole fig tree thing became a business, back when it was still a hobby, I did acquire a few trees online. So this was one of the first trees that was planted in our orchard here, and I don't really remember where I got it from. Now, all those trees that I purchased in the beginning, I have since verified that they are the variety they say they are, with the exception of this one here, because until this year it really hadn't done anything. Now, if you go online to Google Translate and type in the word Marroncino, it says that's an Italian word for brownish, which, as I'll show you in a minute, seems to fit. But if you just do a simple Google search for Marroncino fig, really nothing comes up. Now, the AI generated result will tell you that it's a synonym for Moroccan fig called Maroc Noir, but the pictures I'm seeing of Maroc Noir don't match what I've got here. So I don't really think they're the same thing. So now let's talk a little bit about the history of this particular tree in my orchard and why we've threatened to cut it down so many times. So for the first 3, maybe even 4 years this tree was in my orchard, didn't have a single fig on it. Now, the tree grew really well. As you can see, it's quite large now, and we have pruned it a little bit just to keep the limbs out of our mowing lanes. So it grew well, just never had any figs on it. And then a couple years ago, early in the season, I started noticing some small figs forming on it. Very small, and they would start to turn color a little bit, start to get a little bit brown, but they stayed hard. They never ripen, and they just eventually fall off before they ripen. And so over the last 2 or 3 years, we get more of those little figs on there this time of year every year, but never actually got to try one because they were hard as a rock and fell off. I even went as far as to propagate one in a pot last year just to see if I'd get any different results. Maybe they don't like my soil there in that spot and they'd like this potting soil better. You can see here, same kind of situation, very fast, vigorous growth. This thing here almost 5 foot tall already. Now, because I couldn't find anything about this variety online, I didn't really have anyone to compare notes with, but my best guess was that this was some type of Capri fig, a fig that requires pollination. All the other varieties in our orchard are common figs or parthenocarpic. They don't need pollination. You can plant just one tree and it will produce figs for you. But since this one never made ripe figs, although the tree would be somewhat loaded, I started thinking, well, maybe it's a Capri fig, and that's why I was going to cut it down, because I really don't have any interest in doing a lot of fig pollination. And then this happened. So when I was mowing these pathways the other day, riding along here on the lawnmower, I noticed these massive figs forming on this tree there. Never seen anything like this on this particular tree. I've only seen something like that eventually turn a little bit of color and fall off. Now, important to note here, these are breba figs. You can see there they have been formed on the old growth, not the new growth. So those green ones you see there, those are main crop figs. These big ones we see are breba figs. Now, I hadn't found one ripe enough to try yet, but it looks like the birds and the bugs did, and from the looks of that one there, they really enjoyed it. So these are some pretty dang big figs, and I don't have anything else like this in my orchard. That's how I know it's not just a duplication of some other variety I already have. Now, that GE Neri fig we have does make figs this big, doesn't make breba figs this big, but the color on those is more red or maroon, not brown like these. So the one I opened the other day, the skin felt soft, but having never tried these before, I didn't really know what to look for as far as the final ripe color. When I opened it up, it was obviously not ripe and had a ways to go. This one here looks like the birds and the bugs been pecking on it a little bit. So let's open it up, see what we've got inside here. Looks like we've got a fully formed fig there. And pretty tasty. Very, very sweet. Honey, sugar notes. Let's look at this one right here. Oh yeah. Very, very meaty fig there. And for a breba fig, which are usually not that great, this one here is pretty dang good. Really, really, really sweet. So we still don't know a whole lot about this particular variety here. We now know it has the potential to make some massive, tasty breba figs. We'll see if those main crop figs ripen and get to this size. I had no idea they had this much size potential to them, because the ones that formed in the past were relatively small and unimpressive. And the only thing I've really done differently in my orchard this year is really pour the water to my trees. And I've done that mainly because I had so many of them die back this winter, and I'm trying to recover some of that growth that I lost. So I've been pumping the water to my orchard, and maybe that's what that variety there really needs. Maybe it needs more water to give us this. So I'll keep you updated as to whether those main crop figs develop into nice, big, sugary, sweet figs like these breba figs did. And if you've ever heard of this variety or got any direction you can point me in to get a little more clarity here, I would certainly appreciate it. Now let's switch gears and talk about this tree right here, which has some ties to old George himself. So a gentleman I know, and I call him a gentleman because he's always dressed to a T, super nice and thoughtful. A gentleman I know has some friends that live in Virginia, and supposedly there's a fig variety that grows on Mount Vernon, or that area, and he was able to obtain a few cuttings from his friend. He then watched some of my videos, learned how to propagate from cuttings, grew one out, and gave it to me, which I think is really, really awesome that he thought about me and then watched the videos and propagated one. And here we have a beautiful little fig tree. Now this will need some fertilizer. The leaves are a little bit pale, but once we put it in the ground in the next week or so, it should start turning greener and should show some nice, vibrant growth. Now this one here, even in this little pot, already has 4 or 5 little figs on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grow this thing out. I'm going to make sure it's not the same as anything else I have in my orchard or anything else I can find online related to a Mount Vernon native fig tree. And if we can't find anything else about it and it seems unique, we're just going to call it the Mount Vernon tree. So we don't know a whole lot about this variety yet, but what we do know is that if it grows in the ground consistently year after year in Mount Vernon, it must be pretty dang cold hardy. So that's why I'm really excited to give it a try here. A lot of people are always asking for cold hardy varieties, and if it grows in Northern Virginia, it will grow in a lot of places. And lastly, let's stroll on over to the big greenhouse and see what we've got left growing in there. So as you can see here, our fig trees are looking great. They're really enjoying this environment in here. Nice, lush growth on these trees. And at this point in the game, everything has been stepped up to a 4x9 pot, which we use for shipping. So it's mostly fig trees in here, but I do have a few mulberry trees right here. I need to get these listed on our website. Really nice, pretty mulberry trees from that big tree we have in our backyard. My mulberry propagation rate wasn't that great, so I don't have as many as I thought I was gonna have, but the ones we have look very nice. And our injection system in here is still working really well. I've got the hang of it now, understanding how much to put in there when I want to push them or when I want to back off a little bit. Now, one change I had to make recently, a few weeks ago, as far as my fertilization goes, I had to switch from AgriThrive back to the blue stuff. Just on the trees in here, I still use AgriThrive on my veggie transplants in the little greenhouse. But for these trees right here, I had to switch back to the blue stuff. And the reason I had to do that has a lot to do with how I water in here, which is overhead. So when I put enough AgriThrive in that canister there to really push those trees, which is about halfway full, it was leaving little brown spots on the leaves of my fig trees. Now you can't see them now because we've switched over, we've kind of pushed them out of it, but it was leaving these less than desirable brown spots on the leaves. Now, having done this enough, I knew those brown spots were purely cosmetic, but I'd rather not chip a fig tree with brown spots on the leaves if I can help it. So that's why I had to make the change, because to get that AgriThrive at a high enough concentration to really push the trees, it was staining the leaves. So we switched back over to the blue stuff. Took a little trial and error, very delicately raising my rate because that stuff can burn the trees. And I would recommend, if you've got young trees, don't play around with it a whole lot because it can be tricky to work with. My injector here is using a 200-to-1 ratio, so it's diluting a lot, and that's why I can get away with it. Now, before you get your pitchforks out and say, I thought you said that blue stuff was terrible, keep in mind here, what we've talked about on previous videos is how, and studies suggest this, the AgriThrive develops a better microbial community around the roots, and that's why I still use it exclusively in the greenhouse where we grow our veggie transplants. But I had to make a switch in that semi-commercial greenhouse there where we're growing out our fig trees to sell. Had to make a change because the dark color of it was staining those leaves. So you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you got to explore different options. Yes, those roots may not have as many microbes in them, but we have, you know, better looking leaves on those trees there. And as far as the trees we have left, let's go through some of these varieties, show you some of the bigger stuff we have left in here. So some trees are still a little small. These LSU Thibodeau trees right here, while very healthy and would take off when you put them in the ground, not as big as some of the other varieties we have in here at the moment. So we've got some really nice looking LSU Tiger trees. These magnolia trees here look fantastic. LSU Purple looking good as well. And LSU Gold, those almost always look great. Those GE Neri trees over there are doing really well. And we've got some fantastic looking Italian everbearing trees right now. And these 4 trays right here, all 64 of those trees will be added to our orchard pretty soon. So new to us varieties, usually 2 of each, that we'll be putting in the ground soon. So that's a very small taste in the actual number of varieties that we have in there now, but a lot of people ask, what are your biggest trees at the moment? So I figured I'd show you those varieties that are larger than others. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that Marroncino fig back there and that Mount Vernon fig that I acquired. And if you want to see more giant figs, varieties in our orchard that make especially large figs, watch this video from last year where we're walking around showing some of the larger figs that we get. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.